Trump. They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders.
For years, the woke left have held up Canada as their shining snow globe of perfection, America's polite, maple-flavored role model. But not everyone's buying that sweet fantasy, especially not Bill Maher. On a fiery episode of Real Time, he didn't just poke holes in the myth. He burned it down like a stack of overcooked pancakes. Buckle up, because this roast is coming in hot and extra crispy.
Canada was where every woke white college kid wearing pajama pants outdoors who'd had it up to here with America's racist patriarchy dreamt of living someday. There's only one problem with thinking everything's better in Canada. It's not. Not anymore, anyway. Last year, Canada added 1.3 million people, which is a lot in 1 year, the equivalent of the U.S. adding 11 million migrants in 1 year. And now they're experiencing a housing crisis even worse than ours. And we're sleeping in
Maher doesn't waste a second. He dives straight into the woke left's maple-flavored fantasy and shatters it like a snow globe tossed in a blender. First target: Canada's housing disaster, the love child of those feel-good immigration policies the American left drools over like it's Willy Wonka's golden ticket. The cold reality? Canada's staring down a staggering 3.5 million home shortfall by 2030. A gap so massive it makes California look like a landlord's dreamland. Meanwhile, more than 1 in 5 Canadians are already shelling out over 30% of their income just to avoid turning their Teslas into studio apartments. Yet the woke crowd keeps painting Canada as some utopian winter wonderland. Maher doesn't just roll his eyes. He torches that fantasy like a bonfire in a blizzard.
The median price of a home here is $346,000. In Canada, converted to US dollars, it's $487,000. If Barbie moved to Winnipeg, she wouldn't be able to afford her dream house, and Ken would be working at Tim Hortons.
Housing in Canada isn't just pricey, it's downright savage. The average home costs between $500,000 and $540,000. And if you're eyeing a spot in Vancouver or Toronto, brace yourself. Prices rocket past $750,000 and can easily top $1 million in US dollars before you can even whisper mortgage crisis. Compare that to the US, where the average home sits closer to $350,000 to $400,000, and suddenly that so-called Canadian utopia feels more like an economic deep freeze. Yet the woke left keeps chanting about copying Canada's brilliant model. But let's be real, most can barely keep up with rent now. Slap Canadian price tags on American homes, and you're not building a progressive paradise, you're mailing out mass eviction notices. Maher's point hits like a Yukon blizzard. Copy Canada, and you won't fix affordability. You'll just freeze out the middle class.
And because of mortgage debt, Canada has the highest debt-to-GDP ratio of any G7 nation. I don't know what that means, but it sounds bad. So does their vaunted healthcare system, which ranks dead last among high-income countries in access to primary healthcare and ability to see a doctor in a day or two. And it's not for lack of spending. Of the 30 countries with universal coverage, Canada spends over 13% of its economy on it, which is a lot of money for free health care.
Canada's cracks are spreading faster than a frozen lake in spring. And the Liberal fan club's perfect utopia fantasy is melting right along with it. The truth? The problems up north run a lot deeper than that maple-scented myth ever admitted. And here's the kicker. Bill Maher isn't some MAGA firebrand swinging a conservative flag. He's a lifelong liberal, once celebrated as the left's razor-sharp mascot. That's exactly what makes his takedown sting so much. The criticism isn't coming from the opposition, it's coming from one of their own. If even Maher is calling foul on Canada, the dream isn't just cracked, it's shattered beyond repair. But here's the twist. Maher isn't just ranting for ratings. He's holding up a mirror to America, smirk and all, basically saying, "You really want to copy this? Because if Canada's your model, Buckle up for sky-high housing, broken promises, and a front-row seat to disappointment. And the wild part? He's just getting started.
Look, I'm not saying Canada still isn't a great country. It is, but those aren't paradise numbers. If Canada was an apartment, the lead feature might be America adjacent. And if America was a rental car, Canada would be America or similar. And again, honestly, Canada, I'm not saying any of this because I enjoy it. I don't, because I've always enjoyed you. But I need to cite you as a cautionary tale to help my country. And the moral of that tale is, yes, you can move too far left. And when you do, you wind up pushing the people in the middle to the right.
This is what happens when society collectively decides everyone gets to rewrite reality, and the rest of us are forced to play along in the improv act. The result? Pure unfiltered chaos, gender edition. Picture this: confused students watching their teacher flip identities like channels. On Monday, he arrives in a dress, proudly announcing his new womanhood. Applause demanded. Tuesday, he's back to being a man, business as usual. No explanation, no reflection, just whiplash and bewilderment. That's not education. That's performance art on a sugar crash. And not the profound kind that sparks dialogue. The kind that leaves everyone wondering if they missed the plot twist or the prescription refill. When identity turns into a revolving door, clarity packs up and leaves. What's left isn't enlightenment. It's chaos dressed up as progress.
So far off the cliff that anyone standing still now looks like a Reagan speechwriter by comparison.
At its worst, Canada is what American voters think happens when there's no one putting a check on extreme wokeness. Like the saga of Canadian shop teacher Kayla Lemieux, whose pronouns are she, her, and those. Kayla is now back to being a guy named Kerry, but 2 years ago, when they showed up to teach children, the progressive high school they taught at said that they, the school, not the person. Really, you couldn't have found another word. We were using that one. Anyway, okay. They were committed to a safe environment for gender expression. Safe for who? What about the children?
And let's be honest, this circus of extreme wokeness isn't unfolding in some faraway ideological bubble. It's happening right next door, in the land of maple leaves and polite smiles. Canada. The same country America's liberals keep romanticizing like it's heaven with universal health care. To them, it's the flawless model, progressive, compassionate, modern. But scratch off that sugary maple glaze, and the picture gets a lot messier. Families crushed by sky-high housing prices, identity politics running wild, classrooms turning into social experiments, and a government obsessed with optics over outcomes. Yet the American left still gazes north like love-struck idealists, convinced Canada is living out the dream. It'd be funny if it weren't so tragic. Because if this is what utopia looks like, it's built on a foundation of debt, denial, and dysfunction. Maher's point cuts through the fluff. Before liberals rush to clone Canada's policies, they should probably read the fine print. Spoiler alert. The fantasy brochure left out the part where paradise costs your paycheck and your sanity.
Leaves. What's left isn't progress. It's a costume change masquerading as enlightenment.
That's when things change, but what people say about them doesn't. Yes, for decades, places like Vancouver and Amsterdam and Stockholm seemed idyllic because everything was free and all the energy we needed was produced by riding a bike to your job at the
Maher's absolutely right here. Trump didn't just appear out of thin air. He was a reaction, a consequence, a mirror held up to a culture that had finally exhausted everyone's patience. Millions of Americans, not just conservatives but moderates and even disillusioned liberals, reached their breaking point with the endless parade of woke theatrics. The Democratic Party had turned into a political circus. Identity politics taking center stage, cancel culture working the crowd, and virtue signaling sold at every concession stand. People weren't buying tickets anymore. And it wasn't just older voters walking away. Even young people, the generation Democrats thought they owned, started tuning out. Because when a movement stops standing for freedom of thought and starts enforcing ideological obedience, it stops feeling like progress and starts feeling like detention, just with better Wi-Fi. The DNC didn't just lose the White House, they practically hand-delivered it to Donald Trump. sealed with a hashtag and a self-righteous smile.
They say in politics, liberals are the gas pedal and conservatives are the brakes. And I'm generally with the gas pedal, but not if we're driving off a cliff. On the trans issue, America is no ands, ifs, or buts about it, absolutely alone in the world now, an outlier country. Last month, England's National Health Service announced that there's not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty blockers for third graders, and that they were going to stop fumbling around with children's privates, because that's Prince Andrew.
Here's the irony the woke crowd refuses to face. The very countries they hold up as shining examples of progress are now pulling the plug on their own gender dogma. Sweden, Finland, and the UK, the holy trinity of the left's imagined utopia, have each reversed course, tightening or outright banning medical transitioning for minors. Their reason? Something refreshingly simple. Actual evidence. They decided that irreversible treatments probably shouldn't be part of teenage experimentation. These nations did what America's woke class won't. They paused, examined the data, and chose to protect kids rather than appease activists. While US elites chant "follow the science," Europe quietly stopped marching to that beat. Turns out, the supposedly enlightened world figured out that children's futures aren't something to gamble with just to earn standing ovations from Twitter mobs.
To America's choice to affirm children's wishes on switching gender, no matter the age or psychiatric history. The far left, which always like to use, well, Europe does it. Yeah, no, that doesn't work on this one anymore.
True enough, throwing open the borders to anyone with a pulse and a passport stamp isn't compassion. It's chaos disguised as kindness. And now we're living in the wreckage. Fentanyl smuggling and addiction have skyrocketed, turning once stable communities into ground zero for one of the deadliest epidemics in history. This isn't about inconvenience. It's about families destroyed, neighborhoods hollowed out, and a generation slowly disappearing under the weight of a chemical nightmare. The numbers are staggering, but the pain behind them is even worse. Ordinary Americans who once lived in peace now pay the price for political recklessness. The left calls it compassion. But what kind of compassion leaves kids overdosing in school bathrooms and parents burying their children instead of sending them to college? Maher's warning cuts deep. If America can't protect its borders, it can't protect its people. And without security, there's no peace, only policy-wrapped chaos. His takedown of Canada and the radical left isn't just comedy, it's a reality check. From housing meltdowns to gender confusion, border failures to fentanyl devastation, the so-called utopia collapses when faced with reality. America doesn't need Canada's blueprint. It needs leadership, logic, and a firm grasp on truth. So, if this message hits home, hit that like button and subscribe for more unapologetic takes. Thanks for watching. And as Maher says, we're not done yet.